How many times have you suffered over something that didn't even happen? You're living in the present, but your mind has already run off. It's way ahead, imagining worst-case scenarios, creating threats, building problems that don't actually exist. What if everything goes wrong? What if I lose this? What if I'm not enough? Before anything even happens, you're already exhausted, anxious, afraid. But what if I told you that most of this suffering isn't necessary? That a lot of what you feel comes from illusions your own mind creates? This isn't a new idea. Eastern philosophers have talked about it for over 2,000 years. Buddha, Laozi, Zen masters. They all pointed to the same truth. The problem isn't the world, it's how we think about the world. In this video, we're going to explore why we create problems that aren't real, with 20 powerful insights from Eastern philosophy. Starting today, you'll begin to see more clearly, live with less fear, and stop fighting the ghosts that only exist inside your own head. Imagine waking up from a dream so vivid, so real, that for a few seconds, you can't tell whether you're still dreaming or actually awake. Now imagine that this feeling isn't just a trick of the mind, but a glimpse into a deeper truth about life and reality. That's exactly what the Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi, also spelled Chuang Tzu, proposed over 2,000 years ago, in one of the most poetic and mysterious passages in Eastern philosophy, the butterfly dream. Zhuangzi wrote, "Once, Zhuangzhou dreamed he was a butterfly, fluttering around, happy with himself, doing as he pleased. He didn't know he was Zhuangzhou. Then he woke up, and there he was, Zhuangzhou again. But now, he didn't know if he was Zhuangzhou who had dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzhou." Zhuangzi, Chapter 2. The Equality of All Things. This isn't just wordplay or a poetic riddle. It's a powerful reflection on the uncertainty of what we call reality. Zhuangzi invites us to ask, what is real? How can we be sure that what we're experiencing right now isn't just another dream? To Zhuangzi, reality isn't something solid, fixed, or fully knowable. It's fluid, ambiguous, and ultimately shaped by how we perceive it. Our urge to find absolute truths and rigid certainties, he suggests, is one of the main causes of human suffering. When we cling to a single version of reality, a belief, an identity, an expectation, we end up trapped by something that's actually an illusion. That's the genius of the butterfly dream. It completely breaks down the idea that there's a fixed self observing reality from the outside. Instead, that self is just part of the flow of experience. There's no permanent Zhuangzi dreaming of being a butterfly, and no fixed butterfly dreaming of being Zhuangzi. There's only the unfolding of experience, sometimes as a dream, sometimes as waking life. Which brings us to a central question. How many of our daily worries come from believing in a fixed reality that never truly existed? We fill our minds with thoughts like, what if I fail? What if things don't go as planned? Or, what if this is all for nothing? These anxieties feed on the idea that life is supposed to follow a predictable path. But Zhuangzi encourages us to question all of that. If we can't even be sure whether we're a man dreaming of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being a man, why do we take our worries so seriously? Why do we give so much weight to fears that may not even be real? Zhuangzi's philosophy isn't skeptical in the modern sense of denying reality. It's freeing. He invites us to loosen our grip on certainty and embrace the lightness of experience. Like the butterfly, we can float, not because we're in control, but because we've let go. Zhuangzi often used strange, funny, or even absurd stories to make his point. He knew that logic alone wouldn't free us from our mental traps. Sometimes it takes a story, a laugh, or a paradox to shake us out of our rigid thinking. Take the butterfly story again. It doesn't have a clear answer, because that's the point. Trying to answer who's dreaming just sends us in circles, and Zhuangzi would smile at that. He didn't want us to solve it. He wanted us to realize we don't have to. This approach is very different from traditional Western thought, which often values clarity, logic, and structure. To Zhuangzi, those are illusions. The real world, the world of the butterfly, is messy, uncertain, and free. Another big part of the butterfly dream is how it questions identity. Who am I? What defines me? My past? My thoughts? My feelings? But all of those things change and fade. So what really stays? Zhuangzi doesn't give a clear answer. Instead, he invites us to let go of the need for one. Identity, like reality, is temporary. Clinging to a fixed idea of who you are is a major source of suffering. When you think you must always be a certain way, you end up fighting the natural changes of life. So maybe we should be more like the butterfly, flowing with the moment, not holding on to a rigid self, not trying to control where the wind takes us. At its core, Zhuangzi's message is about freedom, not political or material freedom, but inner freedom, the kind that comes when you let go of the mental cages built from fear, anxiety, and constant comparison. When we realize reality is unstable and our certainties are fragile, we can finally breathe. There's no need for total control, no need to define everything. Just this present moment, where maybe we're a butterfly dreaming of being human, or maybe we're human, rediscovering what it feels like to be light as a butterfly. So ask yourself, how many times have you worried about something that never actually happened? How many nights have you lost trying to predict the future, cling to the past, or find answers that might not even exist? And what if all of that is just a dream? Not in a mystical way, but in the sense that your certainties are just interpretations. What if peace doesn't come from finding the right answer, but from letting go of the questions that were never needed in the first place? Zhuangzi doesn't want you to find a new truth. He wants you to let go of the need for one. Have you ever caught yourself trying to plan every single detail of your future? As if doing that could somehow protect you from failure, pain, or regret. This need to control what hasn't even happened yet is so common that it's basically part of our culture. But is it really possible to control the future? Or is that the very thing feeding our anxiety? British philosopher Alan Watts, who had a deep understanding of Eastern thought and a gift for explaining complex ideas in simple ways, got straight to the point. Human anxiety comes from the illusion of control. Watts didn't see control as power, but as a mental trap, a kind of resistance to the natural flow of life. He said, "The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing. When you're feeling insecure, it's because you're trying to be secure." That might sound confusing at first, but let's break it down. What Watts is pointing out is that insecurity comes from trying to create a sense of safety where none actually exists. The more we try to control the uncontrollable, like the future, other people, or random events, the more frustrated we get, because life doesn't follow our mental blueprints. To really understand this, we have to go back to the root of the problem, the illusion of the self. Watts believed that anxiety comes from thinking of ourselves as separate from the world, like little captains trying to steer a chaotic ship. That idea, inherited from Western philosophy and modern individualism, is what he saw as the problem. Watts, drawing from Taoism, Zen Buddhism, and Hinduism, argued that this separation is an illusion. We're not just in the universe, we are the universe experiencing itself through a human being. As he put it, "You are not in the universe, you are the universe, experiencing itself as a human for a little while." That shift in perspective changes everything. If you're not a separate entity trying to control the world, but part of a greater whole, then not only is control impossible, it's unnecessary. Trying to control the future assumes that life can be frozen, made predictable. But life, by nature, is always changing. Time itself is change. Watts often used metaphors to explain this, and one of the most powerful was about water. He said, Life is like water. Try to grasp it in your hands, and it slips through your fingers, but if you let it flow, it will find its own shape. In other words, trying to control the future is like trying to hold a river in your hands. It's a fight against the flow of life. Anxiety, then, is a sign that we're swimming against the current. Watts never said we shouldn't plan or think about the future. Wisdom, he said, lies in knowing the difference between healthy planning and obsessive control. Planning is preparing and acting with awareness. Control is trying to force outcomes, even when they're outside your hands. Take studying for a test, for example. That's planning. But if you spend days stressing over the results, that's control. And that's where anxiety kicks in. It's like planting a tree and then tugging on its roots to make it grow faster. What happens? You kill the tree. One of Watts's greatest insights was this: anxiety doesn't come from real events. It comes from mental projections. We imagine future scenarios and react to them emotionally, as if they're already happening. We end up suffering today over a tomorrow that might never come. He once said, "We suffer more in our imagination than in reality." It's a thought echoed by the Stoics, like Seneca, showing how Eastern and Western ideas sometimes align. Watts believed that once we become aware of how our mind jumps ahead, trying to control things that don't exist, we might even laugh at ourselves, not in a mean way, but with the lightness of someone realizing that life is more about dancing with uncertainty than defeating it. If anxiety comes from living in the future, the antidote is coming back to the present, and not just to now as a point in time, but to a state of full presence, really being here. Watts often said that the only time life truly happens is right now. The past is memory. The future is imagination. When we're truly present, there's no anxiety because there's nothing to control. There's only something to experience. And he reminded us, life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. This perspective is deeply transformative. It doesn't deny human pain, but it asks us to step out of the mental loop that keeps the pain going. Trying to control the future won't keep us from suffering, it just keeps us from living. Letting go of control takes courage. It's not easy to release the mental grip we believe is steering things. But surrendering isn't giving up, it's trusting the intelligence of life. Watts called this spontaneous trust in the universe. He encouraged us to look at how everything in nature works effortlessly. Trees grow, rivers flow, planets spin, all without being controlled. And then he asked, why do we think we have to be different? So ask yourself, how much of your anxiety comes from trying to predict what can't be predicted? From trying to guarantee what can't be guaranteed, from holding on to results you can't actually control. Alan Watts didn't offer magic formulas. He offered a mirror that shows us our illusions and invites us to let them go, not out of fear, but with lightness. Because when we stop trying to control the future, we gain something far greater, the freedom to live the present. We live in a world obsessed with productivity, control, and goals. We believe that only through effort, strict planning, and non-stop action can we shape our future and feel secure. But what if this exhausting pursuit is actually the root of our anxiety? What if there's another way, lighter, wiser, and paradoxically more effective? That's the invitation of Laozi, the legendary Chinese philosopher from the 6th century BCE. Author of the Tao Te Ching, he's one of the deepest voices in Eastern wisdom. His core teaching revolves around a principle that's often misunderstood, but incredibly powerful: Wu Wei, which can be translated as effortless action or non-forced action. But let's be clear, Wu Wei isn't about being passive or lazy. It's about acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, without resistance, without unnecessary tension, and without obsessively trying to control what hasn't even happened yet. Laozi wrote, "The Tao never does anything, yet nothing is left undone." Tao Te Ching, Chapter 37. At first glance, that might sound mysterious, but it's the heart of Wu Wei. The Tao, the fundamental flowing force of the universe, doesn't push or force things. It moves naturally, and everything gets done through its rhythm. That's the model Laozi offers us, to live and act like the Tao, spontaneously, fully present, open, and in tune with the natural order of life. Wu Wei is about flow. It teaches us to let go of the mental rigidity that tries to control everything and instead trust the wisdom of the moment. Effortless action is actually the highest form of intelligence. It knows when to act, when to wait, and when to let go. And it does all of that without anxiety. Laozi saw worry as a sign that we've lost connection with the Tao. When we're over-planning, trying to control the future, or resisting the present, it means we've fallen out of sync with the natural flow. A worried mind is always fighting what is, imagining what could go wrong. He said, "Those who cling to their plans miss what's right in front of them." Tao Te Ching, Chapter 64. That hits hard. How many times have you missed the present moment because you were too busy stressing over what hasn't even happened yet? How many chances slipped by because your mind was too distracted trying to predict, control, or avoid imaginary futures? Wu Wei teaches that you can act wisely without being trapped by expectations. It's not about being careless, it's about trust. Trust that, when you act in tune with the present, the future has a way of taking care of itself. One of Laozi's favorite images for Wu Wei is water. He said, "Nothing in the world is softer and more flexible than water, yet nothing can overcome the hard and strong like water can." Tao Te Ching, Chapter 78. Water doesn't resist. It adapts. It flows around obstacles. It slips into tiny cracks. And over time, it reshapes entire landscapes. It acts without force, and that's why it wins. That's the essence of effortless action. Instead of trying to force our will on life, we learn to listen to it, feel its rhythm, and move when the time is right, without stress, without rushing, and without being obsessed with the outcome. The great irony is that when we stop trying so hard, we often accomplish much more. A calm mind sees clearly. A relaxed body responds more accurately. A peaceful heart makes better choices. Laozi wasn't telling us to be passive. He was urging us to be attuned. Wu Wei isn't inaction. It's action that rises from truly listening to the present. It's what happens when we stop fighting the river and start flowing with the current. The wise don't compete, and that's why no one can defeat them. Tao Te Ching, Chapter 22. At the root of worry is the fear that if we're not constantly doing something, everything will fall apart. But Laozi invites us to question that belief. Maybe the world doesn't need constant pushing. Maybe life has its own timing, and the more we try to speed it up, the more we throw ourselves off balance. He said, "Nature never hurries, yet everything gets done." Though often misattributed, this quote perfectly reflects Laozi's spirit. It's a call to trust the process, to take action with presence, and to let go of the need to control everything. The obsession with the future comes from our craving for certainty. But Laozi reminds us there are no guarantees. And maybe that's what makes life beautiful. Wu Wei reminds us that living well isn't about controlling what will happen. It's about being fully present with what is happening. And there's more. When we act from a place of anxiety about what hasn't happened yet, our actions lose strength, focus, and meaning. They become reactions, not authentic expressions. But when action flows from inner stillness, from presence, from truly understanding the moment, it carries a natural power. No force, but with impact. It's important to remember, Wu Wei isn't a permanent state or a magic trick. It's a practice, a path, a constant return to the present, an invitation to listen within. It's not about shutting down the mind, but about watching its movements without letting them take over. Worry will come, but you can let it pass, like a cloud in the sky, without letting it run your life. Laozi didn't write self-help manuals or motivational speeches. His words are like seeds. They don't shout, they grow. And one of those seeds is Wu Wei, this quiet, transformative wisdom that invites us to act lightly, trust the present moment, and release the urge to control. So ask yourself, where in your life are you forcing too much? What are you trying to control at all costs? And what might happen if you just let go, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom? These days, most of our mental energy goes into thinking about tomorrow. Deadlines, expectations, worries, what-ifs. For a lot of people, anxiety about the future has become a constant part of life. But what if the key to overcoming that anxiety isn't about planning more or gaining more control, but simply learning to live with more presence, responsibility, and care right now? That's exactly what Confucius, the great Chinese thinker from the 5th century BCE, taught. Unlike Laozi or Zhuangzi, who focused on the flow of the universe and the nature of reality, Confucius looked at something more grounded: human relationships. For him, the foundation of an ethical and meaningful life comes from how we treat the people around us in the present moment. And that's where his wisdom hits home. If we create harmony in the present, the future tends to take care of itself. Confucius believed that we're not just isolated individuals, we're deeply relational beings. Our identity is shaped and brought to life through our relationships with family, community, and society. That's why his philosophy isn't built on abstract theories but on simple, practical attitudes: respect, empathy, self-control, loyalty, and responsibility. One of the core values in his teaching is Ren, often translated as humaneness or kindness. It's about acting with genuine care and consideration for others, being sensitive to the moment you're in. And when we live this way, we start to reduce the anxiety that often comes from our interactions with others. Think about it. How much of our fear is rooted in what others might think of us? In the worry that we'll be rejected, judged, or forgotten? Confucius offered a clear, powerful response: do the right thing now. When you fulfill your role, treat others with respect, and create harmony in the present, you don't have to fear what's coming next. He didn't ignore the future, but he believed we shouldn't be prisoners of it. He taught that the future is built through our actions in the present, especially how we relate to one another day to day. If you can't serve others now, how can you serve the gods? If you don't understand life, how will you understand death? Analects 11. 12. This quote is powerful. Confucius didn't want us to worry about things beyond our reach. He wanted us to focus on what's right in front of us: how we treat our parents, our friends, our co-workers. Those simple actions shape both our character and our future. The importance of rituals. One of the pillars of Confucian ethics is the idea of li, often translated as ritual or propriety. But it's not just about formal ceremonies. Li includes the everyday gestures that bring order and respect into our lives: saying thank you, listening carefully, keeping your word. Why does this help with anxiety? Because when you practice Li, you create a sense of stability in the present. You build trust, predictability, and mutual respect. In environments like that, fear about the future fades, because you know something solid is being built now. Confucius taught that repeating these small acts isn't fake or mechanical. It's a form of refinement. He said, when rituals are followed sincerely, people become peaceful and harmonious. Analects 3. In today's fast-changing world, Confucius's ideas might seem old-fashioned or rigid, but that misses the point. What he really offered was an ethical life rooted in clarity and mutual responsibility. He believed that in every relationship, between parent and child, ruler and citizen, spouses or friends, there are shared duties. And when those duties are carried out with wisdom and compassion, trust is built in the present, and anxiety about the future fades. This doesn't mean blindly following social rules. It's about a real commitment to harmony. Instead of living in fear of betrayal, conflict, or abandonment, Confucius imagined a society where everyone understands their role and acts with virtue. The noble person acts first, then speaks according to their actions. Analects 2:13. Another major idea Confucius shared is the importance of moral consistency. It's not enough to be kind today and careless tomorrow. Inner peace and confidence in the future come from being steady in the present. The wise person doesn't act with virtue only when it's convenient, but because it's part of who they are. That brings us to one of Confucius's most inspiring thoughts. The noble person seeks harmony, not sameness. Analects 13:23. This means living with virtue isn't about pretending everything's perfect or avoiding conflict at all costs. It's about maintaining harmony through life's differences, facing challenges with balance so that the future becomes a result of wise living, not a source of fear. Confucius didn't offer quick fixes or feel-good advice. His philosophy takes effort, patience, and character. But it gives us something priceless: the ability to fully live what's in front of us, instead of getting lost in what-ifs. Anxiety grows when we disconnect from the present. When we get lost in fear or hope about the future, we stop acting with clarity in the now. And then, the future feels shaky, not because of fate, but because we've neglected what matters today. Confucius reminds us, tomorrow is built right here. The trust we want to have in the future starts with how we show respect today. The misunderstandings we want to avoid tomorrow can be prevented by listening well right now. So ask yourself, how are your relationships today? Are you living with presence, responsibility, and care in the now? Or are you trying to fix the future without taking care of the present? Confucius shows us that true inner peace doesn't come from trying to make the future perfect. It comes from doing the best you can with the moment you have, here, now. Have you ever noticed how so much of our emotional pain comes from things that haven't even happened yet? Thoughts like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I lose this? What if everything spins out of control? This constant worry about the future traps us in a cycle of anxiety and dissatisfaction. But over 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha, clearly identified the root of this suffering. And his insight has stood the test of time. Suffering comes from desire. This is the core of Buddhist teaching, summed up in what's called the Four Noble Truths, one of the most powerful frameworks in all of human philosophy. Let's explore these truths and see how they can help us let go of the need to control what hasn't happened yet, and in doing so, ease the anxiety we carry every day. First noble truth: life comes with dukkha, suffering. Buddha starts with a blunt truth: life involves suffering. But this isn't pessimism. The original word he used, dukkha, means more than just physical pain. It includes discomfort, restlessness, frustration, that nagging feeling that something is always missing. How many times have you felt that way, even when everything in your life seemed fine? The mind always finds something to worry about. That's dukkha, and it's universal. No matter how privileged your life is, everyone feels that sense of unease or emptiness at some point. And a big part of that comes from constantly expecting the future to be different from the present. Second noble truth: suffering comes from desire, tanha. Here's the key point: we suffer because we crave. We want reality to match our expectations. We want things to stay the same. We want control. We want guarantees. The original word tanha means thirst, a deep, unquenchable craving. This craving is what causes our suffering, and a huge part of it is the craving for control over the future. We want emotional safety, financial security, and the guarantee that nothing will go wrong. But the truth is, life is always changing. It's unpredictable and interconnected. Our desire to control that goes against the nature of reality, and that's where suffering is born. Imagine a river flowing freely. You try to mentally build a dam to stop it, but the more you try, the more the water slips through your fingers. That constant effort to hold on to what's naturally moving just leaves us exhausted. Third, noble truth: it's possible to end suffering now. For the good news, suffering can stop. When we stop feeding the craving, especially the craving for control, we find peace. That doesn't mean giving up on goals or becoming passive. It means letting go of attachment. A mind obsessed with controlling the future is always tense. A mind that learns to go with the flow of life feels free. And this freedom isn't apathy, it's deep presence. It's not laziness, it's conscious surrender. Buddha called this peaceful state nirvana, the extinguishing of the fire of desire. And we don't reach it by escaping life, but by living it with full awareness. Fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path. So how do we actually let go of desire? Buddha's answer was the Eightfold Path, a guide made up of ethical, mental, and meditative practices that lead to wisdom and compassion. Here are 3 parts of the path that help us directly with the craving to control the future. Right view. Understand that everything is temporary. The future can't be controlled, and that's okay. Life isn't a project to manage. It's a mystery to experience. Mindfulness. Stay rooted in the present moment. The more you focus on now, the less room there is for imaginary worries. Right effort. Do what needs to be done with intention, but without obsessing over the results. Take action, but don't cling to the outcome. Buddha said, walking the path is like crossing a bridge, from the suffering that comes with craving to a state of peace and balance. One of the most important concepts in Buddhism is anicca, impermanence. Everything changes, everything passes, and it's our refusal to accept this that causes pain. We try to hold on to things that are meant to flow, protect what's meant to move, and control what can't be controlled. The desire to lock in a perfect future is a denial of impermanence, and that denial traps us in fear and frustration. Buddha calls us to do the opposite. Accept change, trust the process, and let go of the obsession. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. That quote may be modern, but it perfectly captures the spirit of the Four Noble Truths. Life will bring pain, loss, and surprises, but we don't have to cling to the mental suffering that comes from resisting it. The antidote to control is presence. When we are truly here, there's no room for future anxiety. We're breathing, aware, alive. Buddha said, don't dwell in the past, don't dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. That teaching is clear and powerful. Every time we try to control the future, we pull ourselves away from the only place where life actually happens. Now. Now is where change is possible. Now is where freedom begins. Siddhartha Gautama didn't start a dogmatic religion. He offered a path of observation, practice, and release. The Four Noble Truths are like a diagnosis and treatment plan for the restless mind that's always trying to control life. So ask yourself, how much of your suffering today comes from trying to control tomorrow? What would happen if you just did your best in the present and trusted that life will unfold the way it needs to? Buddha didn't teach us to run from life. He taught us to be aware of it. And his message still rings true. Suffering is born from desire, especially the desire to control what hasn't even happened yet. Have you ever stopped to think that many of your fears, anxieties, and worries don't actually have a solid foundation? That sometimes you suffer over things that haven't even happened, and probably never will? Nagarjuna, one of the greatest philosophers of Mahayana Buddhism, invites us to take a deep look at this through a concept that's as subtle as it is powerful: shunyata, or emptiness. But don't get it wrong. Emptiness isn't some depressing void. Quite the opposite. It's a path to freedom. It's the understanding that everything, our thoughts, feelings, and imagined situations, has no fixed essence. And because of that, everything is flexible, changing, and interconnected. When we truly understand this, we begin to see that our worries about "what if this happens" don't have a solid base. They're mental constructions built on top of other constructions. They're shadows of shadows, and we don't need to be trapped by them anymore. Nagarjuna lived during the 2nd to 3rd century CE and is known as the founder of the Madhyamaka school, the middle way. His approach to philosophy was radical. He didn't try to create new absolute truths. Instead, he broke down the ones people already believed. His method was dialectical, showing that any concept, when pushed far enough, eventually collapses. Not to confuse, but to liberate. His most famous conclusion was this: everything is empty of svabhava, meaning everything is empty of inherent essence. That goes for objects, ideas, identities, and yes, even our worries. What is emptiness really? Emptiness doesn't mean things don't exist. It means they don't exist in a fixed, independent way. Everything arises in relation to something else. Everything is conditional. Everything depends on causes, context, and interpretation. Take this as an example. The fear you feel about failing in the future. That fear doesn't exist by itself. It depends on your memories, beliefs, expectations, and mental images. It's built. And if it's built, it can be taken apart. Nagarjuna said, "Things arise in dependence upon other things. Whatever arises dependently is empty of its own essence. That is the middle way." This interdependence shows us that nothing has a fixed, unchanging identity. And if nothing has a solid core, then there's nothing we absolutely have to cling to, not even our fears and worries. Think about how many times you've been anxious about something that might happen. Your mind builds stories, plays out scenes, makes up entire narratives. But all of that is just projection. It's empty, built from inner elements like fear, attachment, and the need for control. Emptiness teaches us that these worries have no solid substance. They're not reality. They're mental simulations. When you blindly believe them, you're treating shadows like brick walls. But when you recognize their emptiness, you realize there's nothing there that deserves that kind of weight. Nagarjuna isn't saying to ignore or deny your experience. He's saying not to treat it as absolute truth. Seeing emptiness is seeing freedom. If everything is interconnected and empty, then everything, including our relationship with fear and anxiety, can be transformed. We suffer because we think things are fixed. I'm just like this. This is definitely going to happen. That situation will destroy me. Statements like these carry the weight of solidity, of essence. But emptiness breaks that illusion. When you see the emptiness of an emotion, it loses its power to dominate your mind. This Buddhist teaching perfectly captures Nagarjuna's message. Our fears only have power when we believe they're real, solid, and inescapable. Emptiness doesn't erase emotions. It changes your relationship with them. You can feel fear, but you don't have to believe in it. You can have an anxious thought, but you don't need to follow it to the end. You learn to see your thoughts for what they are: empty, conditioned, and impermanent. A lot of people are afraid to study emptiness, thinking it means denying reality. But Nagarjuna shows us the opposite. By understanding that things are empty, we can relate to them in a lighter, more creative, more compassionate way. Think about how the desire for control comes from the fear that things will turn out a certain way. Emptiness dismantles that fear at the root. If nothing is fixed, then the future isn't either. And if everything depends on causes and conditions, then we can act right now, in the present, to change those conditions, without suffering over what hasn't happened yet. Emptiness doesn't paralyze you. It sets you free. It says, you're not stuck in a fixed identity. Your life isn't written in stone, and your anxious thoughts are just passing clouds. Nagarjuna offers a path of balance, not claiming that things have essence and not saying they don't exist. That's the true middle way. It's not about denying your experience. It's about not clinging to it as if it were the final word. And that includes our worries. The mistake isn't feeling anxious. It's believing that anxiety defines reality. Nagarjuna invites us to see anxiety as it really is, a mental process, empty of essence but full of conditioning. And conditioning can be changed. One who understands emptiness is free from all mistaken views. Nagarjuna invites us to look at what seems solid and see its emptiness, not to escape life, but to be free from the attachments that cause suffering. Most of our fears about the future are just hollow projections, made of unexamined thoughts, emotions, and desires. Once you understand this, you don't need to fight with the future or run from the present. You can simply look at your thoughts and say, "This too is empty." And it's in that deep, liberating, and compassionate awareness that true inner freedom lives. Have you ever caught yourself imagining 1,000 different scenarios about what could happen tomorrow? Have you felt that quiet restlessness that creeps into your mind even when everything seems fine? This is a universal human experience, the restless mind, constantly projecting itself into what hasn't happened yet. But there's a path to peace, a simple, direct, and deeply transformative path: mindfulness. And at the heart of this practice is an ancient tradition that invites us to quiet the mind and fully inhabit the now: Zen Buddhism. Zen doesn't care about intellectual explanations for life. It wants you to experience life directly, without layers, without judgment, without overthinking what things should be. And the key to that is complete presence. What does mindfulness mean in Zen? In Zen, mindfulness isn't just being aware of what's happening. It's being fully present with your body, your mind, and your heart. It's showing up for this exact moment as if nothing else exists. Because honestly, nothing else does. This practice is often called shikantaza, which literally means just sitting. But sitting here isn't only physical, it's existential. It's stopping the mental chase. It's not seeking, not running, not trying to control. It's simply being. And even though that sounds simple, it's actually radical. Because the modern mind is constantly moving, planning, remembering, judging. It wants answers, certainty, control. And that's exactly where anxiety begins. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The present moment is the only moment available to us. If you miss the present, you miss your life." In Zen, you're invited to stop living in your head and start living through your senses. To hear the sound of the wind, feel the texture of the ground beneath you, breathe with intention. And when you do that, something amazing happens. Anxiety disappears. Why? Because it has nowhere to exist. Anxiety needs psychological time. It needs what if. It needs a made-up tomorrow. But when you are fully present, when you wash a cup as if the entire universe is right there, there's no space left for what hasn't happened yet. One of the most beautiful ideas in Zen is the concept of beginner's mind, Shoshin. It's the kind of mind that approaches each moment as if it were the very first time, without assumptions, without expectations, without comparisons. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. The anxious mind is the expert's mind. It already knows what could go wrong. It's already playing out worst-case scenarios. It's stuck. But the beginner's mind is light, open, present. And that kind of mind doesn't need to control the future because it trusts the wisdom of the moment. That's not naivety. That's depth. That's spiritual maturity. Contrary to what some people think, Zen doesn't require you to move to a monastery or spend hours in formal meditation. It asks for something much more challenging. Bring mindfulness into the simplest parts of your daily life. Eat with full attention. Walk without rushing. Listen to someone without already thinking of your response. Take a deep breath before reacting. Each of these small actions is a door to the present, and the more you practice them, the less space anxiety has to grow. Zen master Dogen said, "Study the way with your whole body," meaning, don't just understand mindfulness intellectually, live it. At the root of anxiety is the desire to control. We want to make sure everything goes as planned. But life isn't a plan, it's a process. And Zen invites us to trust that process, not with passivity, but with presence. Thich Nhat Hanh said, Anxiety is the biggest waste of energy. It makes you feel like you have to do something, when really, all you need to do is breathe. It may sound too simple, but try it. Next time you're anxious about something that hasn't happened yet, stop. Close your eyes. Breathe. Feel your body. Bring your attention to this moment. You don't have to fix the future. You just have to be here. Zen reminds us that now is always enough. Even in hard times, there is always a space of presence where peace can be found. That space is like the quiet center of a storm. The world might be spinning outside, but you can be fully grounded within. And when you practice presence every day, something begins to shift. Anxiety doesn't vanish overnight, but it loses its grip. You stop identifying with it. You observe it. And eventually, it passes. It's important to say this. Zen isn't about stopping thought, as in denying your responsibilities. It's about seeing thought, not as reality. When you realize your fear of the future is just a mental movie, you don't have to get stuck in it. In Zen, this is called non-attachment. You let thoughts come and go, like leaves floating down a river. They rise, and you let them go. Zen doesn't offer magic solutions. It offers practice, silence, simplicity. But most of all, it offers presence. And that presence is the best antidote to the anxiety of trying to control what hasn't even happened. When you're fully in the now, there's no more what if. There's only what is. And that what is more than enough. We often live as if time were a straight line, the past behind us, the future ahead, and the present, a narrow point we're supposedly living in. But is that really how time works? Is the future something that just hasn't arrived yet, and the past something that's already gone? And more importantly, does it make any sense to worry about things that don't even exist? For Eihai Dogen, a 13th century Japanese Zen master and founder of the Soto school of Zen in Japan, the answer is clear, but also deeply challenging. Time is not a line. Time is being, and every being is time. This idea is expressed in one of his most profound and mysterious writings, Uji, often translated as being time. And understanding this can completely change the way we deal with anxiety, especially anxiety about the future. What is Uji? In Uji, Dogen makes a radical statement. There is no being separate from time. Every being is its expression in time, and time is how being exists. He writes, being is time is being, each being is time, and Dogen, Uji, being time. This means that time isn't a container we live inside of, it is us. You don't exist within time, you are time. Every thought, every action, every breath is an expression of the time you are right now. This view completely dissolves the idea that the past is back there and the future is out there. Everything is happening here. Everything is unfolding in this moment. Anxiety comes from believing that the future is something separate from the present, that it's out ahead, and that we can predict it, control it, or protect ourselves from it. But for Dogen, that's an illusion. He shows us that the future isn't something waiting to happen. It's just a possibility showing up now. When you're worried about the future, you're not dealing with a real event. You're dealing with a thought, happening right now. And that thought is part of the time you are in this exact moment. That changes everything, because it breaks the mental cycle of trying to predict, plan, and control what by definition doesn't exist yet, and brings you back to what's really happening. Dogen doesn't deny that we have memories or expectations, but he wants us to see it clearly. Every memory happens now. Every thought about the future happens now. When you relive a trauma or project a fear, you're not in the past or in the future. You're in the present, mentally creating something that's not actually happening. That's not wrong, it's human. But it's also an invitation to awareness. Why live in what isn't, when you can fully be in what is? Dogen's view isn't just metaphysical, It's deeply practical. If time is being, then the way you live right now is how you shape your time. Every action, every choice, every pause is a moment of being time. The practice of Zazen, seated meditation in Zen, is the perfect example. When you sit in silence, not trying to get anywhere, not trying to become anything, you are manifesting time just as it is. No rushing, no running, no anticipating, just being. And in that being, everything is already complete. Dogen said, "To sit in Zazen even for a moment is to be illuminated by the entire universe." That means when you give yourself fully to the now, to your breathing body, to the sounds around you, to life as it is, you're not wasting time. You're living time in its purest form. If the now is all that truly exists, and if time is the shape of being, then what are we really doing when we worry about the future? We're moving away from ourselves. Worry is, deep down, a desire to escape impermanence. We want to control, guarantee, make things certain. But for Dogen, that attempt is just illusion. He invites us into a radical kind of trust. Time knows what it's doing, because time is you. This isn't about giving up, it's about wisdom. It's not about letting things happen passively. It's about acting with presence, awareness, and surrender, trusting that each moment is already complete. Another deep insight from Dogen is this: time doesn't pass, time shows up. There's no river of time flowing from past to future. Each moment is whole, full, and complete. And that leads to a powerful realization. You don't need to chase time. There's no time to gain or lose. There is only the time that you are, right here, right now. And the more present you are, the more time reveals itself as freedom. The greatest freedom Dogen offers isn't the power to change the future. It's the freedom to no longer be a prisoner of it. When you see that now is the only real time, and your future fears are just mental shadows, you can breathe, let go, live. And to live, in Dogen's view, is to bring full awareness to each moment. Eat with attention, walk with awareness, speak with presence, be silent with depth. That's real, lived time, the time we are. Dogen gives us a rare philosophical gem. Time isn't something running out there. It's you. And if your mind is stuck in the future, you're stepping away from the only place where life really happens. So ask yourself, what are you trying to predict, control, or avoid? What would happen if, just for a moment, you were completely here, fully alive in this one unrepeatable moment? Dogen doesn't want you to understand time. He wants you to live it, because only by living the now completely can you find peace, not by controlling time, but by being one with it. Imagine you're facing a life-changing decision. You know what needs to be done, but fear paralyzes you. What if I fail? What if things don't go the way I hope? This kind of anxiety is more common than we think. And it's exactly the inner struggle faced by Arjuna, the warrior in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most profound spiritual texts in Hindu tradition. The answer to this struggle comes from Krishna, the divine guide, who offers Arjuna a powerful truth. Act with integrity, but let go of the results. In other words, do what must be done, without anxiety about how it turns out. That simple yet profound teaching can completely change the way we live, work, and relate to the world. Because anxiety often comes from trying to control things that are simply not up to us. And Krishna shows us there's another way to live, with focus, presence, and trust. The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna that takes place on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Right before the battle, Arjuna breaks down. He's about to fight against his own relatives and teachers. He lowers his bow and says, "I can't do this." He's overwhelmed by doubt, fear, and anxiety. Krishna responds with compassion, but also clarity. You have the right to act, but not to the fruits of your action. Bhagavad Gita 2:47. This is one of the most famous and transformative lines in the Gita. Krishna is saying, do what's right, but don't get attached to what happens afterward. You don't control the results, you only control the quality of your actions. This teaching is at the heart of Karma Yoga, the spiritual path of action. Contrary to what many think, yoga is not just physical poses, it's a way of life. Karma Yoga is about living with full engagement, but without attachment. Krishna says, perform your actions, Arjuna, being steadfast in yoga, abandoning attachment, and remaining balanced in success and failure. Bhagavad Gita 2:48. Being the same in success and failure doesn't mean not caring. It means your inner peace, your sense of worth, and your purpose don't depend on the outcome. You act because it's the right thing to do, not because you want praise, reward, or recognition. And that's incredibly freeing, because most of our anxiety comes from being obsessed with outcomes. We want guarantees. We want things to go our way. We want control. But that only creates pressure, and pressure feeds anxiety. It's important to clarify, Krishna is not telling us to be careless or passive. On the contrary, detachment as taught in the Gita is a higher state of awareness, where you give your full energy to what you're doing, without letting the result define your peace. It's like taking care of a plant with love and attention, but without being anxious about when it will bloom. You water it, give it sunlight, care for it, and trust the process. The blooming is not in your hands, the care is. One of the root causes of anxiety is the ego. The ego wants to win. It wants to be praised. It wants success. And when that ideal is threatened, fear shows up. Anxiety shows up. That's exactly what Arjuna was feeling. He didn't want to fail, disappoint, or be seen as weak. But Krishna dismantles this fear by saying, the wise are not disturbed by the outcomes of their actions. They remain calm in both gain and loss. Bhagavad Gita 2:38. That calmness isn't coldness, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that the true value of your action lies in your intention, presence, and effort, not in the reward. Another key idea in the Gita is dharma, your personal duty, your natural path, the role you're meant to play. Krishna urges Arjuna to follow his dharma, not to be guided by desire, karma, for specific outcomes. It is better to fail in your own dharma than to succeed in someone else's. Bhagavad Gita 3:35. That means living in harmony with who you truly are is more important than achieving success by someone else's standards. When you act just to please others, impress, or prove something, you disconnect from your center. And that's when anxiety takes over. But when you act from dharma, with authenticity and dedication, your heart aligns with life, and fear of the future loses its grip. At its core, Krishna is teaching a philosophy of trust. Not a naive trust, but a deep surrender to the intelligence of the universe. He says the results of your actions belong to the divine, not to your ego. And that trust is a kind of medicine for despair. It frees us from the endless what-ifs. It allows us to live with lightness, even in uncertainty. As Krishna puts it, offer all your actions to me, with your mind focused on me, free from desire and ego, act without anxiety. Bhagavad Gita 3:30. That's a powerful vision. Fight without anxiety, live without attachment, work without fear, love without needing anything back. That's real freedom. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't ask us to stop acting. It asks us to let go of attachment to the results. Krishna reminds us, life is not in your hands, but your choices are, and in those choices lives your true freedom. So ask yourself, how many times have you avoided action out of fear of what might happen? How many times have you suffered because the result wasn't what you hoped? What if, starting today, you gave your full heart and energy to what needs to be done, without expecting anything in return? The Bhagavad Gita invites us to act with courage, but also with ease, to give our best, but let go of control. Because it's in that balance between effort and detachment that real peace is found. Have you ever felt like your mind is running in circles? Thoughts repeating themselves, worries popping up out of nowhere, imagining everything that could go wrong. That restlessness feels normal. But is it really inevitable? For the Chinese philosopher Chuang Tzu, also spelled Zhuangzi, a restless mind isn't a permanent state. It's a symptom. A sign that we haven't truly understood the nature of change. Chuang Tzu was one of the great Taoist thinkers. His writings are filled with imaginative stories, poetic paradoxes, and a deep view of reality as constant flow. He shows us that psychological suffering, including anxiety, comes from trying to hold on to what by nature is always changing. In other words, we worry because we resist the fact that everything changes. And it's that resistance that keeps our minds restless, holding on to what's already gone or fearing what hasn't happened yet. The antidote? Learning to flow with the Tao, the natural way of life. Chuang Tzu wrote, "A confused mind is like a whirlwind of leaves in the wind. The wise man doesn't try to stop it. He sits and watches." That metaphor says it all. When our mind is restless, our instinct is to try to control it, to think our way out, to organize the chaos. But the Taoist sage doesn't fight the storm. He recognizes that the storm is part of the wind, part of life's natural movement. Mental restlessness comes from trying to control what can't be controlled. We try to hold on to thoughts, predict the future, avoid change. But reality flows, and when we don't accept that, we create inner conflict. The mind collapses trying to stabilize what is, by nature, unstable. In Taoism, change isn't the exception, it's the rule. Everything transforms, nothing stays the same. Chuang Tzu said the only constant in life is change itself. He wrote, "Life is like a breath. The world turns, shifts, is reborn. Yet people try to hold on to what slips through their fingers. That craving for permanence is what fuels anxiety. We want love to last forever. We want our careers to keep rising. We want our health to stay the same. But life doesn't follow our demands. And when we resist change, we suffer. The restless mind is like trying to stop a river from flowing. But the Tao, the flow of existence, cannot be held back. The more we resist it, the more anxious we become." One of Chuang Tzu's most powerful teachings is this: the security we search for is often the source of our insecurity. Because when we cling to something, an idea, an identity, a plan, we start to fear losing it. And that fear is what disturbs the mind. Chuang Tzu tells stories that illustrate this paradox with humor and depth. In one tale, a man is terrified of his own shadow. To escape it, he runs non-stop. But the faster he runs, the more the shadow follows, until he collapses from exhaustion. The shadow is like the part of our mind that tries to escape what is naturally part of us. We do the same. We run from change, from uncertainty, from impermanence. But the more we try to run, the more those things follow us. Chuang Tzu isn't telling us to give up. He's teaching deep acceptance, not giving up on life, but stopping the fight against what life actually is. And life, in its essence, is change. He wrote, "One who understands change understands the Tao, and one who understands the Tao lives in peace." That peace doesn't mean life is easy or without challenges. It means not needing certainty to feel grounded. It's the freedom of trusting without control. It's the wisdom of seeing life as a dance, not a plan. So why do we worry so much if everything is meant to change? Because deep down, we still believe it's possible to create a fixed state of happiness, success, or safety. And that belief is what traps us. Chuang Tzu invites us to question that illusion. He shows us that worries are mental constructions based on our need for stability. We want something to last, and just the thought of losing it makes us suffer. But what if we let go of that need? What if we accepted that everything that comes will also go, that love blooms and fades, that pain rises and passes, that time reshapes everything, including us. The path Chuang Tzu offers is a return to the Tao, living in harmony with the nature of things. This doesn't mean being passive, it means being sensitive, acting in tune with the flow of life, not against it. He says, "The perfect man has no fixed mind of his own. He flows with the changes." This change isn't the loss of self, it's the release of attachment. It's living with an open heart, allowing life to unfold as it does. It's trusting that even within chaos, there's wisdom in the movement. There's meaning in the unpredictable. Chuang Tzu's sense of humor is a big part of his wisdom. He laughs at the mind trying to control everything, at the man running from his shadow, at our constant search for certainty. Because he knows all of that is an illusion, and life, at its core, is lighter than we think. His philosophy isn't heavy, it's light, like the flight of a butterfly. Light not because it's shallow, but because it's wise. Because only those who understand impermanence can laugh lightly in the face of uncertainty. A restless mind is a mind fighting reality. A mind that doesn't understand or won't accept the nature of change. But Chuang Tzu shows us, peace doesn't come from defeating change, it comes from flowing with it. So ask yourself, what are you trying to hold on to in your life? What are you trying to predict, guarantee, or control? And what would it feel like to live with more trust in the flow, more acceptance of change, and more ease in the face of uncertainty? Chuang Tzu doesn't want you to stop thinking. He wants you to stop clinging to thoughts that keep you stuck. And in place of worry, he wants you to discover the freedom of dancing with the wind of life. Fear is a quiet, persistent presence. It hides between the lines of our decisions, our relationships, our expectations. We're afraid of losing, afraid of failing, afraid of not being enough. And behind every fear, there's a common thread: attachment. Attachment to the image we've built, to the certainty we've created, to the outcome we want. But what if fear isn't an unavoidable part of life? What if it's just an illusion, a product of the mental prisons we create for ourselves? That's what the Heart Sutra, Prajnaparamita Hridaya, one of the most essential and profound texts in Mahayana Buddhism, teaches. In this sutra, we find a powerful and liberating statement: where there is no attachment, there is no fear. At first glance, this sounds simple, but it comes from a level of wisdom that goes beyond ordinary thinking, prajnaparamita, or transcendent wisdom. Let's explore what this really means. The Heart Sutra is short, but filled with deep meaning. It summarizes the Buddhist insight into emptiness, shunyata, taught in depth by thinkers like Nagarjuna. In this text, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, while in deep meditation, sees that the five aggregates, form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, are all empty. And by realizing this emptiness, he becomes free from all suffering. One of the central passages of the sutra says, "Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Form is not separate from emptiness, and emptiness is not separate from form." And soon after, no gain, no loss. Therefore, the Bodhisattva has no mental barriers, and because there are no barriers, there is no fear. This is the heart of the teaching. Fear doesn't come from events, it comes from the mental barriers we create, and those barriers come from attachment. But what is attachment exactly? In Buddhism, attachment isn't the same as care or love. Attachment is the need to keep something fixed, the urge to hold on to what is always changing, to guarantee what can't be guaranteed. It's the illusion of permanence in a world where everything is impermanent. We get attached to ideas, identities, memories, people, and things. And the more attached we are, the more fear we feel. Because attachment creates dependency, and dependency brings insecurity. If I'm attached to the idea of success, I fear failure. If I'm attached to a person, I fear losing them. If I'm attached to a plan, I fear it falling apart. The Heart Sutra teaches that when we let go of attachment, fear dissolves. To really understand this, we need to understand emptiness. In the sutra, empty doesn't mean nothing exists. It means that nothing exists independently, permanently, or separately. Everything is interconnected, changing, and dependent on causes and conditions. To see the emptiness of things is to realize that nothing is exactly how we think it is. The self I try to protect, empty. The image I try to maintain, empty. The future I try to control, also empty. When we deeply understand this, our attachments begin to weaken, because we realize we've been holding on to illusions. And when attachment fades, fear has nothing to cling to. That's why the sutra says, no gain, no loss, no fear. If there's nothing to gain, there's nothing to lose. And if there's nothing to lose, there's no reason to be afraid. This doesn't mean we should live without emotion, relationships, or passion. Quite the opposite. It means living with inner freedom, loving without clinging, acting without needing, being present without being attached to the outcome. The Heart Sutra invites us into that kind of freedom. It says, you can live fully with compassion, with intention, with purpose, but without fear. Because fear doesn't come from the world. It comes from the mind, trying to hold on to what's always slipping through its fingers. When Avalokiteshvara sees the emptiness of all phenomena, he becomes free from pain. That doesn't mean his life becomes perfect. It means he no longer carries mental obstacles. No more illusions clouding his view. He sees what is, and in seeing clearly, he finds peace. That peace isn't something you earn in the future. It arises in the present when the mind stops resisting. When we accept that everything changes, that everything is connected, that nothing really belongs to us, we relax, we breathe, we live. And in that space of acceptance, fear has nowhere to stay. So how can we bring this wisdom into daily life? The Heart Sutra isn't just meant to be read, it's meant to be lived. Here are some ways to practice its message. Notice your attachments. Where do you feel the most fear? What are you trying to protect or guarantee? What are you afraid of losing? Recognize emptiness. See that your thoughts, emotions, and plans are temporary, conditioned, and always changing. They are not you. They are passing expressions. Practice non-attachment. This doesn't mean rejecting or avoiding. It means acting with freedom, loving without clinging, doing without needing, letting go without running away. Meditate on the phrase, no barriers, no fear. Bring this into your day. In anxious moments, remind yourself, fear only has power because I'm trying to hold on to something. The Heart Sutra is one of the most beautiful expressions of Buddhist wisdom. It reminds us that fear isn't our destiny. It's a signal, a sign that we're attached to something we can't hold on to. A gentle reminder that true freedom comes from letting go. When we release our attachments, fear disappears. When we see the emptiness of all things, we discover the fullness of being. And when we live without mental obstacles, we find what was always here, peace at the very heart of existence. Have you ever tried swimming against the current, using all your strength to fight the natural flow of water? It's exhausting, frustrating, and, in the end, pointless. Now imagine life is a river. What would happen if you stopped struggling and started flowing with it? That's exactly what Taoism teaches, one of the oldest and most poetic philosophies in the world. At the heart of Taoism is the concept of the Tao, or Tao, the way, not a fixed road, but an invisible flow that runs through and supports everything. The Tao is both the source and the destination. It's the natural order of life. It doesn't need to be controlled, only followed. And here's the big lesson. Worrying is resisting the Tao. It's trying to hold on to what's meant to flow. It's trying to predict what's still unfolding. It's fighting life instead of dancing with it. What is the Tao? The Tao isn't a thing. It's not a god or a type of energy. It's a subtle and mysterious process that can't be fully put into words. In fact, the classic Taoist text, the Tao Te Ching by Laozi, begins with, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." That gives us a hint. The Tao isn't something to explain, it's something to experience. It's the quiet intelligence of nature, the rhythm of the seasons, the movement of the tides, the cycle of life. It's what makes bamboo bend in the wind and return to its shape without breaking. And that's exactly how we're meant to live, to bend with life, not against it. When we worry, what are we really doing? We're trying to anticipate, to control, to force. We're mentally pushing against the natural flow of things, as if we could hold water in our hands. Taoism sees this as a mistake. A worried mind is a rigid mind, stuck on fixed expectations in a world that's always changing. It's the mind that says, this has to happen exactly this way, and suffers when it doesn't. Laozi wrote, "The wise man is flexible like water. He adapts to what comes. That's why he never breaks." That's the wisdom of the Tao: flexibility, lightness, and trust in the natural course of life. Wu Wei, action in harmony with the flow. One of Taoism's core ideas is Wu Wei, often translated as non-forced action or effortless action. This doesn't mean doing nothing. It means acting so naturally and in sync with the Tao that there's no resistance, no anxiety, no struggle. When you live in Wu Wei, you do what needs to be done, but without stress, without rushing, without trying to control everything. You move with life, not against it. That's why your actions feel clearer, calmer, and more effective. Worry is the opposite of Wu Wei. It's forcing things. It's overthinking, overdoing, trying to fix what doesn't need fixing yet. It's like rowing a boat upstream. You exhaust yourself and don't get anywhere. In Taoism, nature is the greatest teacher. Laozi and Zhuangzi learned from watching the world around them, and nature never worries. It shifts, adapts, dies, and is reborn. It doesn't rush, it doesn't resist, it doesn't cling. Zhuangzi wrote, "Heaven and earth don't take sides, they let things follow their course." That might sound cold, but it's actually freeing. It invites us to do the same, to let life flow, not out of carelessness, but out of trust. It means recognizing that not everything is in our hands, and that's okay. Worry pulls us out of the present. It locks us into constant what-if mode. What if this doesn't work? What if I can't handle it? What if everything falls apart? But Taoism reminds us, life doesn't live in the what-if. It lives in the what is. When you get lost in assumptions, you disconnect from what's actually happening right now. And the now, this breath, this step, this moment, is your only real connection to the Tao. It's the only place where real action can happen. Laozi said, "The one who is at peace in the present does not fear the future." Taoism, at its core, is a philosophy of simplicity. It invites us to live with less effort, less noise, less tension, and worry might be the most subtle form of mental noise. It takes up space inside us. It clouds our judgment. It drains our energy. The path of the Tao isn't about doing more. It's about letting go more. Letting go of control. Letting go of fear. Letting go of the illusion that we're bigger than the flow of life. Zhuangzi said, "The true person breathes from their heels, not from their chest." In other words, they breathe deeply. They live grounded, centered, free from tension. They trust. When we accept the fluidity of existence, worry loses its power, because we see that everything changes, everything passes, everything transforms. And our role isn't to stop life, it's to dance with it. That doesn't make us passive. It makes us aware. We become more in tune with the right moment to act, to wait, to let go. And with that awareness, the restless mind finds rest. because it realizes the need to control is unnecessary. Life knows what it's doing. Taoism offers a gentle but deeply powerful wisdom. Worry is resistance, and peace comes from acceptance. Not acceptance as giving up, but as active presence. A living yes to life just as it is. So ask yourself, where in your life are you pushing against the flow? What are you trying to control, force, or guarantee? And how would it feel to let go a little, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom? Flowing with the Tao is one of the most powerful things we can do, because in that flow, we find freedom, we find lightness, and we find peace. Have you ever felt like your mind was as restless as a stormy sea? Thoughts coming and going, worries piling up, imaginary scenarios stealing your peace. This is a shared human experience, but it's also the starting point of an ancient path toward mental and spiritual freedom, yoga, as laid out in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Way beyond physical poses or breathing techniques, the Yoga Sutras give us a deep map of the human mind. At the center of that map is one key idea, vrittis, or mental fluctuations. According to Patanjali, it's these constant mental movements, especially worry, that pull us away from the inner stillness and wholeness known as samadhi. Worry, in this context, isn't just a feeling. It's a kind of mental disturbance that clouds our awareness, and until we learn how to calm that internal storm, we'll keep living disconnected from our true nature. The goal of yoga, calming the vrittis. Right at the start, Sutra 1.2 says it plainly. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. This is the foundation of all yogic practice. The real goal of yoga isn't to become more flexible or balanced. It's to quiet the endless mental chatter, the vrittis, that trap us in illusion, anxiety, and constant identification. And among these vrittis, worry about the future plays a major role. It's a mental projection based on fear, on the need to control, on the attempt to create certainty where there is none. It pulls our attention away from the present, where life actually happens, and throws us into a world of imagined problems. What are vrittis? Patanjali describes vrittis as patterns of thought that ripple across the mind like waves on water. In Sutra 1.6, he outlines 5 types of vrittis: pramana, correct knowledge; viparya, misperception or error; vikalpa, imagination; nidra, sleep; smarti, memory. Worry usually comes from imagination, vikalpa, and memory, samarti. We mentally create negative situations based on past experiences and then react to them as if they're happening now. That creates anxiety, fear, and restlessness. These thoughts aren't necessarily bad. The problem starts when we identify with them and take them as absolute truth. That's what keeps the mind in chaos and blocks the experience of samadhi. Samadhi, clarity and union. Samadhi is a state of deep inner stillness, free from distractions and mental noise. It's the highest goal of yoga, not a trance, but a deep clarity where you fully experience your true nature, pure, silent, and present. In Sutra 1.3, Patanjali says, "Then the seer rests in their true nature." But this only happens when the vrittis stop, and that includes the ones created by worry. Because as long as we're stuck in what if thinking, we're not in the present, and not truly in ourselves. We often confuse worry with responsibility. We think worrying helps us prepare for the future. But in truth, worry is an emotional reaction, not a conscious action. Real responsibility comes from clarity. It observes, evaluates, and acts. Worry comes from a need to control. It imagines, stresses, and paralyzes. Patanjali doesn't tell us not to act. He tells us to act from a place of calm and presence, not from mental chaos. And that only becomes possible when we slow the mind down and observe our vrittis without getting caught in them. The practice of nirodha. Let go, observe, calm down. The word nirodha in the Yoga Sutras doesn't mean suppress. It means to quiet, to settle, to soften through conscious awareness. This is done through practices like Shraddha, trust in the path, the practice, and the wisdom it brings. Vairagya, detachment, letting go of attachment to thoughts, even the need to control. Abhyasa, consistent practice, gently but steadily training attention and presence. Dhyana, meditation, creating inner silence as the foundation for peace. When we live this way, we start seeing worry for what it really is, just another passing thought, not a fact. And when we see it clearly, it loses its power over us. The beauty of the Yoga Sutras is that they don't ask you to shut down the mind, but to understand it. When we become familiar with our mental patterns, we gain freedom. Freedom to act with awareness, not on autopilot. Freedom to choose silence over reaction. Patanjali reminds us, the mind can be your prison, or it can be your ally. That's why developing discernment, viveka, is so important. With it, we learn to tell the difference between what's real and what's just a mental construction. Worry loses strength when we realize it's just another vritti, a wave that can rise, but also settle. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali gives us a timeless truth. Peace doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from quieting the mind. Samadhi, that state of clear presence, isn't something far away. It begins when you notice your inner restlessness with kindness and choose not to feed it. Worry is a disturbance of the mind. It pulls us away from presence. But yoga calls us back to the body, the breath, the now. So ask yourself, how many of your thoughts today were just vrittis? How much worry are you holding because you're afraid to let go of control? And what would it feel like, just for a moment, to simply observe, breathe, and allow your mind to rest? Imagine someone gets hit by a poisoned arrow. Instead of getting help right away, they start asking questions. Who shot the arrow? What kind of wood is it made from? What type of poison was used? Meanwhile, the poison spreads and the pain gets worse. Sounds ridiculous, right? But according to the Buddha, this is exactly what we do with our emotional pain every day. This is the famous parable of the poisoned arrow, a direct and powerful teaching from Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, that invites us to focus on what truly matters. It's no use worrying about distant causes when the pain is happening right now. What matters isn't understanding why we hurt, but caring for the pain itself, here and now, with awareness and presence. This teaching feels more relevant than ever. We live in a time of constant analysis, always trying to explain everything, dig into the past, justify traumas, and build complex stories. But often, that search is a form of escape, a way to avoid facing what's actually alive in us, the pain that needs immediate care. One day, a student asked the Buddha some deep philosophical questions. Is the universe eternal or not? Is there life after death? Is the self the same after reincarnation? Instead of answering, the Buddha told this story. Suppose a man is wounded by a poisoned arrow. His friends try to get a doctor, but he says, "I won't let the arrow be removed until I know who shot it. What caste is he? Where is he from? What kind of bow did he use? What poison is in the arrow?" He would die before he got the answers. This story carries a powerful truth. Pain has to be addressed directly before we overthink it. Asking too many questions, overanalyzing, and trying to think our way out of pain can actually be a way of avoiding it. Our minds often go straight to, why am I like this? What caused this? Was it my childhood? Did I make a bad decision back then? Self-knowledge is valuable, but if it's not paired with compassion and action, it can become a trap. The Buddha doesn't say understanding is wrong. He just warns us not to use thinking as a shield to avoid feeling, because the mind that overanalyzes is usually trying to control something. And pain doesn't need control. It needs care. That's a major shift in perspective. Instead of getting lost in theories, the Buddha invites us to come back to the body, the breath, the direct experience. The question changes from, why am I suffering, to, what am I feeling right now, and how can I take care of it? Pain that isn't acknowledged turns into long-term suffering. We can spend years holding on to resentment, fear, and frustration, trying to explain it all logically, but never touching the real wound. With his usual clarity, the Buddha reminds us that the only answer that really helps is the one that brings relief to the pain we're feeling right now. If I'm angry, sad, or anxious, I need to tend to those emotions, not get stuck in why they appeared. This wisdom is deeply practical. You don't have to solve your entire life story today. You don't have to unpack every detail of your trauma. You just need to recognize what's alive in you and offer it your presence. The arrow in the story is more than a literal image. It represents the events that wound us emotionally. A loss, a rejection, a failure, an injustice. But the poison is what follows. The mental reactions, judgment, attachment, denial. While we focus on who's to blame, the poison spreads. Resentment grows, fear takes hold, anxiety consumes us. And the antidote? Awareness, compassion, direct action. The Buddha says, there are things that help us find freedom from suffering, and things that don't. Obsession with distant causes often does not, because the only thing that truly transforms pain is meeting it where it is. The remedy for overthinking the past or obsessing over causes is mindfulness. When we return to the now, we realize the pain can be held. The mind can calm down. The body can rest. This doesn't mean ignoring the depth of life or avoiding the roots of suffering. It just means putting first things first. Relieve the pain, then, if still needed, understand the causes. It's like putting out a fire before trying to figure out how it started. The Buddha reminds us that compassion is more important than explanation. In Buddhism, suffering is part of being alive. But unnecessary suffering, the kind we create by resisting or avoiding pain, can be transformed. The key is to recognize it, feel it, and respond with simplicity. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Can I welcome this feeling without judgment? What can I do now to care for this pain? These questions are much more healing than, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve it? How do I make sure this never happens again? The focus shifts from analysis to care, and that's where transformation begins. The parable of the poisoned arrow teaches something deep and urgent. Pain needs to be cared for, not theorized. The mind that chases endless answers is often trying to run from the real experience, and that escape only makes the pain last longer. So ask yourself, what arrow are you carrying today? Are you overthinking instead of healing? Are you looking for answers while the poison keeps spreading? The Buddha invites us to let go of the need to control everything, to quiet the noise of our questions, and to return to what really matters, caring for our pain with presence and compassion. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. This is one of the most obvious and yet hardest truths to accept. It's natural to want stability, predictability, and a sense of control. We want the good moments to last forever, and we want uncertainty to stay far away. But reality, as the Buddha teaches, doesn't work like that. Everything that begins will also end. And in Buddhism, that truth has a name: anicca, impermanence. Truly understanding anicca isn't just a philosophy, it's an inner shift. Because most of our stress and anxiety, especially about the future, comes from not wanting to accept this simple fact. Everything changes. What is anicca? Anicca is one of the three core truths in Buddhism, along with dukkha, suffering, and anatta, the absence of a fixed self. Together, they explain why we suffer and how we can become free from suffering. Anicca literally means not permanent or always changing, and it applies to everything: our thoughts, emotions, bodies, relationships, and life situations. Nothing, absolutely nothing, lasts forever. The more we try to ignore or resist this, the more we suffer. It's like trying to stop a sunset with your hands. The more we fight change, the more pain we feel. A lot of our anxiety comes from the need for control. We want to make sure the future turns out a certain way. We want love to last, success to continue, and pain to never return. But wanting stability in a world that constantly changes, as the Buddha said, is one of the main causes of human suffering. Our minds create stories like, what if I lose this? What if things go wrong? What if everything changes all of a sudden? These questions reveal a deep fear of impermanence, a fear rooted in attachment. Attachment to what we have, who we are, and what we hope to hold on to. But the Buddha was clear, suffering over things that are guaranteed to change is living in illusion. Impermanence isn't pessimism, it's clarity. At first, anicca might sound sad or even hopeless. If nothing lasts, what's the point? But that's not the Buddhist perspective at all. Actually, impermanence is what makes life meaningful. Moments are valuable because they don't last. Things change, and that's what allows us to grow, restart, and transform. As Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. If things didn't change, pain would last forever. Ignorance would never fade. Healing and progress wouldn't be possible. Impermanence is what allows for renewal, learning, and new beginnings. It's the heartbeat of life. Buddhist practice invites us to experience anicca, not just as a concept, but through direct observation. In meditation, we sit and watch thoughts come and go. Feelings rise and fade. The breath flows in, then out. Everything moves. Everything shifts. Nothing stays the same. And when we realize this, something inside us softens. We stop fighting reality. We stop demanding that the future be predictable. We stop clinging to a fixed identity. As the Buddha taught, whatever has a beginning also has an end. This kind of understanding takes the fear out of change, because we realize we don't need to control the future. We just need to be present, knowing that this moment too will pass. Accepting anicca doesn't mean giving up. It means aligning ourselves with reality. It's like trying to freeze the ocean. It can't be done. Movement is part of life. And within that movement is where beauty, growth, and wisdom live. When we embrace impermanence, we stop living in constant tension. We stop obsessing over the future because we see that the future isn't something to control. It's something that will come and then change, just like everything else. Pain is part of life. But suffering, in the Buddhist sense, is optional. Suffering comes from resisting pain, and most of that resistance comes from refusing to accept that everything changes. We want pleasure to last. We want people to stay. We want good things to never end. But the harder we hold on, the more we suffer. Anxiety is just one form of this resistance. Trying to stop the natural flow of life. Accepting anicca is like letting go of the chain you've been using to hold back a river. The river keeps flowing, but now you're not drowning from trying to resist it. When we live with an awareness of impermanence, we learn to cherish the now. We hug with more presence. We listen more fully. We forgive more easily, because we know nothing is guaranteed. This isn't a dark or depressing thought. It's a gentle reminder. This moment is all there is. The future hasn't happened yet. The past is already gone. And right now, this breath is where life is actually happening. Living with this clarity means living more deeply. It means stopping the habit of postponing life. It means letting go of the worry about what might happen and showing up fully for what is happening. The idea of anicca, impermanence, is one of Buddhism's most powerful truths. It teaches us that everything changes, everything passes, everything transforms, and suffering arises when we try to pretend that's not true. Worrying about the future is deep down refusing to accept the nature of life. It's trying to fight what's inevitable. But the Buddha invites us to do the opposite, to see, to accept, and to let go, too. So ask yourself, where in your life are you trying to hold everything together? What are you afraid to let go of? And how would it feel to live with more ease, knowing that everything changes, including you? Have you ever felt disconnected? Like you're just a small piece, floating alone in a chaotic world, trying to find your place? That feeling, which is so common in modern life, goes deeper than it seems. It's not just psychological, it's metaphysical. According to Vedanta, one of the oldest schools of Indian philosophy, human suffering, including anxiety, comes from one main illusion: the belief that we are separate from the whole. This philosophy reaches its peak in the teaching of non-duality, known as Advaita Vedanta. Advaita literally means not two. It's the understanding that all is one, not as a theory, but as the true nature of reality. There aren't two things. There's no me here and world out there. There's no God separate from being, no inside and outside, subject and object. There's only the one, Brahman, and everything else is a passing appearance. The self and the other, a fundamental illusion. According to Advaita, suffering comes from identifying with the small self, the jiva or individual ego. This I believes it is separate, vulnerable, and always under threat. It constantly needs to protect, prove, defend, achieve. And that endless effort is what creates anxiety. Anxiety, then, isn't really about the future. It's about the belief that I am facing the future alone, that the world is out there, apart from me, that I am a limited being surrounded by an indifferent universe. But Advaita answers clearly. That is illusion, Maya. It's a projection of the mind, a distortion of what's real. And until this illusion is broken, inner unrest will continue. Reality is one, Brahman. Advaita teaches that beneath all appearances, there is only one reality, Brahman, pure, unlimited, eternal consciousness. It doesn't begin or end. It doesn't change. It exists beyond time, beyond form, beyond separation. And that reality is who you truly are. The great teacher, Adi Shankaracharya, one of the most important figures in Advaita, put it this way: Brahman is real. The world is appearance. The self is Brahman. This is the key to liberation. When you realize that you are Brahman, not the limited ego, anxiety disappears, because there's no longer an other to fear, no future to control, no separation to create insecurity. Anxiety isn't rooted in reality. It's created by the mind. It's what happens when we break the world into me and the world, me and others, me and God. That split creates conflict, fear, and the need to control. Advaita invites us to dissolve that split, not by rejecting the world, but by recognizing our oneness with everything. Through self-knowledge, Atma-vidya, we come to understand that the individual self was never truly separate. We've always been the ocean, never just a drop. When that realization sinks in, the mind becomes still. And in that stillness, anxiety has nowhere to land. In Advaita, liberation, moksha, doesn't come from blind faith or devotion. It comes through direct knowledge, jnana yoga, the path of insight. It's about learning to tell the difference between what's real and what's not, what's eternal and what's temporary, who you are and who you're not. This leads to a powerful realization. I am not the body. I am not my thoughts. I am the awareness that sees them, we. This awareness, called Atman, is the same as Brahman. There are not two things, and when you see that, all the suffering of duality fades away. Anxiety reveals itself as nothing more than a dream created by the mind that thinks it's just a separate form. A classic Vedantic metaphor captures this well. Imagine it's getting dark and you see a rope on the ground, but you mistake it for a snake. You feel fear, tension, anxiety. But once you shine a light and see it's just a rope, the fear vanishes. Nothing actually changed, only your perception did. That's what liberation in Advaita means. You don't need to change the world, or your body, or your thoughts. You just need to see clearly. You were never separate. This isn't an intellectual idea. It's something you feel, as pure presence. When you sit in silence and observe your breath, your thoughts, your sensations, little by little, something becomes clear. There's a quiet space behind everything, a steady presence that never changes. That presence is the Atman. It doesn't fear the future because it's beyond time. It doesn't need control because it's whole. It doesn't crave safety because it is reality itself. From the perspective of this awareness, anxiety is like a passing cloud in the sky. It shows up, but it doesn't stay. It doesn't touch the sky. It doesn't change what the sky is. One of the most radical truths in Advaita is that there is no path to follow. You already are what you're looking for. The search for freedom only makes sense as long as you believe you're trapped. But the right understanding reveals you were never truly separated. Adi Shankaracharya said, "You are always free. Your bondage is imaginary." When you realize this, the need to control the future, which fuels anxiety, simply fades. Because you're no longer a fragile little self trying to survive in a hostile world. You are being itself, expressing through a temporary form. Non-duality in Advaita Vedanta is an invitation to the deepest truth. Anxiety is born from the illusion of separation. When we believe we're just a vulnerable ego, the world feels threatening. But when we awaken to our true nature, one with all that is, peace naturally follows. So ask yourself, where in your life are you feeling alone, disconnected, or vulnerable? And what would change if you looked at those parts through the eyes of unity, realizing that there's no out there, no other, no separation at all? Have you ever noticed how many of your worries aren't based on reality, but on assumptions you've made up yourself? Scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen, but still take up space in your mind, filling it with fear and anxiety. The Chinese philosopher Xunzi, one of the major voices of classical Confucianism, saw this with striking clarity. Uncontrolled worry comes when imagination is in charge instead of reason. Unlike more idealistic thinkers like Mencius, Xunzi had a more realistic, even skeptical, view of human nature. He believed people are born with a natural tendency toward desire, impulse, and emotion. And because of that, we need to develop reason, order, and moral education. That's how we turn raw potential into real virtue. And part of that process involves learning to rationalize our emotions. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding where they come from, recognizing when they're distorted, and guiding the mind with clarity. For Xunzi, wild imagination is a constant source of suffering, and the antidote is conscious use of reason. Xunzi believed the human mind has a powerful ability to imagine, anticipate, and project. But when that ability isn't grounded in rational thinking, it becomes a source of imbalance. He saw imagination like fire. It can warm you, or it can burn you, depending on how you use it. Worry begins when imagination starts spinning stories out of nowhere. What if I fail? What if everything goes wrong? What if people judge me? These thoughts aren't coming from reason. They come from misunderstood emotions, amplified by a mind that's lost focus. Xunzi once said, "Emotions arise from contact with things, but it's the mind that chooses how to respond." In other words, external events can trigger emotions, fear, doubt, anger. But our rational mind is supposed to guide how we respond. For Xunzi, uncontrolled worry is a failure of that process. Fear itself is natural. But the problem is when that fear turns into constant worry, fueled by imaginary situations. Xunzi believed that the undisciplined mind is like a horse without reins. It runs wherever it wants, with no direction. And the more we feed negative imagination, the more real it feels. The body reacts as if the threat is happening now. Heart races, breathing changes, thoughts loop endlessly. But in reality, nothing actually happened. It's all in the mind. This is where Xunzi's wisdom becomes powerful. It's not enough to notice the emotion, you have to train it. Reason isn't the enemy of emotion, it's the guide. Reason brings perspective, moderation, and clarity. Xunzi's philosophy is deeply ethical. He believed human beings need education, rituals, and social rules to develop good character. Unlike the romantic idea that we're naturally good, Xunzi believed we are moldable, and that's why we need direction. The same applies to emotions. Worry, when driven by unchecked imagination, becomes anxiety, paralysis, and suffering. But when it's acknowledged and regulated by reason, it can transform into caution, awareness, and responsibility. The goal isn't to repress emotions, it's to cultivate self-control. Watch your thoughts, question your assumptions, set boundaries for your imagination. Xunzi saw this as part of becoming wise, someone who isn't ruled by impulses, but acts with discernment. He believed in constant mental training. He said, "Muddy water clears if left still." The same is true for a troubled mind. For Xunzi, mental discipline means observing your thoughts carefully, questioning whether your assumptions are true, redirecting your mind toward what's useful and real, avoiding the habit of feeding baseless ideas. That's the exact opposite of what worry does. A worried mind repeats, dramatizes, exaggerates. But a trained mind, as Xunzi teaches, asks, is this a fact or is it just imagination? Is this actually happening or am I just afraid it might? That simple shift can dissolve a lot of anxiety. It's important to understand. Xunzi wasn't saying we should eliminate emotions. He saw their value in human life. But he believed emotions need to be aligned with moral and rational order. So in that sense, worry isn't just a psychological issue. It's also an ethical one. A mind dominated by fear and fantasy loses its ability to act wisely, to contribute to others, and to stay balanced internally and socially. Rationalizing emotions is, therefore, a way to stay grounded, both inside and out. And for Xunzi, that balance is the foundation of a virtuous life. His core message can be summed up like this: imagination should serve reason, never rule over it. When imagination rules, we create monsters in our minds, unrealistic fears and unnecessary worries. But when reason leads, imagination becomes a tool. It helps us foresee real risks, solve problems, expand our perspective, all without losing touch with what's real. That's the key Xunzi offers us. Use reason as a lighthouse in the emotional fog, not to suppress your feelings, but to guide your mind with clarity and strength. We live in a time where imagination runs wild, fueled by social media, constant information, and non-stop emotional triggers. The modern mind is hyperactive, anxious, overwhelmed by what-if scenarios. But Xunzi, with his classical wisdom and realistic view of human nature, offers a powerful remedy. Don't feed worry with imagination, train it with reason. So, ask yourself, what worries are you feeding with thoughts that haven't happened? What stories are you telling yourself that aren't rooted in reality? And what would it look like to face those emotions with more reason, more discernment, and more balance? Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, stuck in the same loop of thoughts? What if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if there's no way out? An anxious mind constantly spins scenarios, looks for guarantees, and tries to control what's beyond our reach. But there's one simple question that can cut through all of this. Can it be solved? If yes, there's no need to worry. If not, there's also no point in worrying. This is the direct and powerful wisdom of Shantideva, an 8th century Indian Buddhist monk and philosopher, best known for his classic text, Bodhicharyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva. With a mix of compassion and clear reasoning, Shantideva offers a practical remedy for anxiety and worry, understanding what is and isn't within our control. Who was Shantideva? Shantideva was a scholar at Nalanda, an ancient Buddhist university in India, known for his deep wisdom and humility. His work, The Way of the Bodhisattva, is both a spiritual and practical guide for those who follow the Bodhisattva path, beings committed to awakening not just for themselves, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. This path requires more than compassion. It calls for courage, clarity, and the strength to walk lightly, even through suffering. And for that, we must free our minds from unnecessary worry. The classic. Quote, simple but deep. One of the most famous lines from The Way of the Bodhisattva is, if something can be fixed, why worry? If it can't be fixed, what's the use of worrying? At first, it might sound too simple, but this phrase holds real freedom. It reminds us to accept the limits of our control, and in doing so, to find peace in the present. Let's break it down. If it can be solved, if there's something you can do, a decision to make, a step to take, a conversation to have, then worry is pointless. Instead of acting, we get stuck in fear. Instead of solving the problem, we drown in the fear of failure. Shantideva flips the logic. If action is possible, then act with compassion, with courage, with clarity, but not with panic, because anxiety clouds the mind, weakens your resolve, and blocks clear action. Worrying is like carrying extra weight you don't need. Action helps. Worry just drains you. If it can't be solved. And what about when nothing can be done? When something is completely out of your hands, like the death of a loved one, a mistake already made, or an event that can't be avoided. Here, Shantideva's wisdom goes even deeper. If something is beyond your power, worrying won't change a thing. It just adds more suffering to what already hurts. This isn't passive resignation. It's active clarity. It's seeing that life isn't always in our control, and trying to control the uncontrollable is the root of anxiety. Often, worry comes from the illusion that if we think hard enough, we can avoid pain. We believe that by imagining every possible outcome, we'll be safe. But Buddhism teaches that suffering doesn't come from pain, it comes from our resistance to pain. Shantideva invites us to let go of that resistance, to accept that some things just are, that life includes uncertainty, loss, and impermanence, and that peace doesn't come from avoiding these things, but from living lightly even when the storm is raging. The Bodhisattva, in Shantideva's view, is someone who walks steadily even through suffering. That steadiness comes from inner clarity, not brute strength or blind optimism, but the calm of someone who knows the difference between what can be changed and what must be accepted. That clarity is a kind of freedom. When you stop worrying about what you can't change, you free up energy to be present where you actually have power. Practicing awareness and letting go. So how do we apply this? What's your thoughts? When you catch yourself worrying, ask, can this be solved right now? If yes, what can I do? If no, can I let it go? Come back to the present. Worry lives in the future. Bring your mind to the now. Breathe. Feel your body. Anchor yourself. Trust impermanence. Everything changes. What feels impossible today might shift tomorrow. What feels scary now could hold a lesson later. Practice self-compassion. Worry often comes from self-pressure. Be kind to yourself. Recognize your limits without judgment. The power of calm inaction. Shantideva isn't preaching inaction. He's teaching action without panic. The Bodhisattva doesn't escape the world. They engage it with clarity. And that clarity comes from a calm mind, free from confusion and fear. It's possible to take action without anxiety, to care deeply without carrying fear, to love without trying to control another person's fate. That's the freedom of the Bodhisattva. to live in the world without being ruled by its chaos. Shantideva's wisdom is practical. It invites us to live with more insight, more calm, and more compassion, and to realize that worry solves nothing. It only keeps us from peace and from action. So ask yourself, what worry is taking up most of your mental space today? Can it be solved? If yes, what step can you take? If not, how can you let it go? Have you ever wished you could just pause your thoughts for a moment? That mental storm of memories, worries, what-ifs, and doubts. Now imagine not just silencing all that noise, but actually feeling a deep freedom, a living experience of no thought, Wunyan, as taught in Zen Buddhism. This state isn't empty in a dull or blank way. It's full of presence, pure awareness, wide open, without mental clutter. In that space, thoughts have no grip, and your mind rests in what's real. What Wunyan really means. Wunyan literally means no thought. But in Zen, it doesn't mean you stop thinking or try to force your mind to be blank. It means you stop identifying with your thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts, mental events that come and go. They aren't you. Think of it like the sky. Clouds pass through, but the sky remains untouched. Your mind is the sky. Your thoughts are just clouds. Practicing Wunyan means you start to see the difference between the one who sees, you, and the stuff that appears in the mind. The mind as a mirror, clear or cloudy. Zen often uses this mirror metaphor. A busy, cluttered mind is like a dusty mirror. Nothing reflects clearly. A mind in Wunyan is like a clean mirror. Whatever appears is seen clearly, but nothing sticks. Worries and mental noise are like clouds covering the sky. Wunyan doesn't try to push the clouds away. It lets them pass naturally. It's not the absence of thought, it's the absence of mental chaos. Thoughts still happen, but they don't take over. They aren't treated as truth. They're just passing scenes. The path to a thought-free mind. Zazen, seated meditation. The gateway to Wunyan starts with Zazen, sitting, breathing, letting thoughts come and go like passing clouds. When the urge comes to follow a thought, return to the breath. Do this over and over, and your natural presence becomes clearer. Awareness in everyday actions. You can practice Wunyan while brushing your teeth, washing dishes, or walking. Just stay with what's actually happening. No stories, no mental chatter. Watching without judgment. When a worried thought pops up, like, what if? Or, I should have. Just notice it. See the shape of it. Then let it go. Don't hold on to it. Don't feed it. Active silence. Wunyan isn't about shutting everything down. It's about not letting your mind be taken over by old patterns or noisy thoughts. Your mind opens up, lighter, clearer, more alive. Why an empty mind is liberating. When I stop identifying with my thoughts, they lose their power over my emotions. Anxiety weakens. When the mind stops creating fake problems, most fears dissolve. They were just mental projections. When my focus is on the present moment, I'm not stuck in the past or lost in a future that hasn't happened. Zen master Ihai Dogen said, "Study the path with your whole body." This means living fully, body and mind together, without drowning in overthinking. Common misunderstandings about Wunyan. It's not about trying not to think. Thoughts will come, that's okay. The practice is just not clinging to them. It's not laziness. A quiet mind can act clearly and compassionately, not from stress, but from presence. It's not about ignoring emotions. Feelings arise, but they don't have to take over. They pass, and you stay grounded. Wunyan in everyday life. Picture this. In the morning, you wake up, breathe, and listen to the silence. You don't dive straight into emails or mental chaos. In traffic, you're present at the wheel. Instead of, I'm late, or this is so annoying, you notice the thoughts, but don't dive into them. When talking to someone, you're fully there, listening to their voice, seeing their expression, instead of being lost in, what should I say next? This doesn't make you less capable. It makes you more alert, more connected, more whole. Real benefits of an empty mind. Clearer thinking. Decisions come from awareness, not stress. Emotional calm. Anxious thoughts lose their grip. Less reactivity. You catch mental triggers before they control you. Deeper relationships. People can feel your real attention. These aren't mystical side effects. They're natural. When the mind isn't constantly pulled around, it returns to what it's always been. Clear, calm, and compassionate. Wunyan isn't something you achieve once. It's a way of living, a gentle, ongoing attention. It can be formal, like meditation, or informal, like small moments of quiet awareness during the day. Each time you return to that presence, you touch a piece that was always there. No thought doesn't mean a blank self. It means a present self. You're no longer trapped in the mind's old stories. You're free to just be. And when you live like that, you'll notice. The mind doesn't need to create drama. And anxiety starts to shrink because it has no place to grow. So ask yourself, when was the last time you stopped, breathed, and let yourself just be, without thought? What would happen if, just for today, you let your thoughts float by and simply stayed present? Ikkyu Sojun, 1394-1481, remains one of the most vibrant and unconventional figures in Japanese Zen. Known as the drunken poet monk, he practiced Zen in a radically honest way, mixing poetry, sex, sake, and irreverence within monastic life. But his rebellion wasn't meaningless. Every action, every word, carried a deeper purpose, to show that true wisdom and spirituality don't come from following strict rules or looking a certain way. His message was simple. Freedom from worry begins when we break free from useless mental conventions. A life that questions the mold born in Kyoto, Ikkyu was ordained as a monk at a young age and reached enlightenment under Master Kazan. But instead of following the traditional path of prestige and ritual, he rejected titles and broke away from formal temple life. Even when he later agreed to lead an important temple, he brought his wild spirit with him. He wrote passionate poems, drank openly in taverns, visited villages, and wore whatever he wanted, sometimes even walking around naked. He refused to play the role of the perfect monk. Ikkyu's irreverence was part of his practice. He showed that Zen wasn't limited to quiet temples or polished rituals. It was alive, in laughter, in pain, in love, in courage. And by breaking external rules, he invited us to break internal ones too. The ideas of who we think we should be, the fake spiritual images we try to live up to, the mental scripts that feed our anxiety. Where anxiety begins, mental conventions. Ikkyu saw that much of our anxiety comes from rigid ideas about who we're supposed to be. I need to please people. I should always appear wise. I can't make mistakes. These are just thoughts, mental habits passed down from others. But we treat them like truths. When we take outside expectations and confuse them with our inner voice, we lose touch with what's real. That's where anxiety grows, in the space between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be. Ikkyu rejected meaningless rituals and fake performances. He encouraged monks to listen to what was actually alive in the moment: birdsong, wind, real laughter, or honest tears. For him, spirituality wasn't about repeating forms. It was about being present without hiding behind a perfect mask. Zen irreverence. Break to be free. Ikkyu's Zen wasn't about careless indulgence or selfish pleasure. He didn't preach reckless drinking or ignoring suffering. Instead, he taught a spirituality that was deeply sincere, intense, yes, but grounded in the truth of the present moment. To him, breaking useless mental patterns required the courage to be whole, to laugh, cry, love, make mistakes, all fully and honestly. He once said true meditation could happen in a temple or a brothel, as long as you're truly present. The flesh that knows, he said, is worth more than 1,000 years of dry meditation. He wasn't rejecting the practice, he was redefining it. Practice isn't about looking perfect, it's about being real. When the mind loosens up, letting go of mental rules and false ideals helps quiet the mind. When you're not constantly trying to prove yourself or live up to an image, you stop building stressful stories about the future. The mind softens. Anxiety loses its fuel. The belief that I must be perfect, I can't fail, or people will reject me if I show my flaws. Ikkyu's flow, his looseness, his boldness, shows us that true spiritual practice doesn't require rigid morality. It asks for wholeness, for honesty, for showing up fully. No fake fears, no symbolic masks, no playing roles, irreverent practices to dissolve worry. Inspired by Ikkyu's spirit, here are some ways to challenge the mental patterns that trap us. Identify the ideal that's causing pain. Ask yourself, what image of myself am I trying to protect? Try creative irreverence. Write without editing. Sing without trying to sound good. Dance without needing the right steps. Trouble the sacred in daily life. In the quiet of morning, let a bird's song or the silence of your room connect you to something real, not something wrapped in dogma. Notice the tension and release it. When you feel inner pressure from an expectation, pause. Ask where it's coming from. Breathe. Let it go. Come back to the present. What actually changes? Breaking mental conventions doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities. It just shifts their weight. Action becomes lighter. Attention becomes deeper. Presence becomes real. Ikkyu's irreverent Zen offers a more organic life, more connection, less mental noise, more courage, fewer fake roles. His message isn't a command, it's a loving challenge. What would your life look like if you let go of the invisible masks? If you stopped listening to the rigid inner voices that say, be like this, or don't be yourself? Every time you break a small mental rule, a belief, an image, a fear, you create space. The agitated mind becomes like a clear lake. Worries don't come from life itself. They come from how we think life should be. And when those thoughts lose their grip, life opens up again. If this video helped you see your worries more clearly, or inspired you to question some of the ideas you've been carrying without even noticing, then don't let this reflection stop here. Take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who also feels stuck in mental patterns, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps this content reach more people. And tell me in the comments, what pattern or expectation do you notice is fueling your anxiety? Let's share experiences. Your response might help more people than you think. And hey, don't leave the channel just yet. There are already other videos waiting for you, full of reflections that could shift the way you live and feel the world. I'll see you in the next one.